you spent this past holiday weekend enjoying time with your loved ones. I know I did. It was great. But if you happened to peek onto social media at any point over the last few days, you may have seen people started speculating without any real, actual acute evidence that something bad happened to Donald Trump. Now, it's true that until today, the president had not spoken publicly in a week. And this past weekend, his public schedule was very light, a lot of time on the golf course. Something about that combination got the rumor mill turning. People shared images of this little bruise on the president's hand, which is not uncommon for a man of his advanced age. Others shared photos like this one showing what outlets like the Daily Beast have referred to disparagingly as Trump's cankles. Again, there's a non-life-threatening medical explanation for that. Trump has been diagnosed with chronic venous insufficiency, which is a common condition that can cause, pretty intense swelling of the ankles like you see there. Still, the rumors managed to get enough traction that Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz seemed to acknowledge them at a Labor Day event yesterday.
Thank you all for coming out today. Thank you for believing in these times, because, look, I get it. You get up in the morning and you doom scroll through things, and although I will say this, the last few days you woke up thinking there might be news. Just saying. There will be news sometime, just so you know, there will be news.
I mean, not just, people that are not big fans of the president, but even Trump's allies have been speculating about his poor health.
So as the crisis gets worse, and it's going to get worse, because you can see him declining faster and faster, I predict Trump is going to have some type of collapse within the next 12 months at the current trajectory. I'm not saying he's going to collapse. I'm saying if he doesn't take his foot off the gas pedal, I guarantee you.
Now, Alex Jones is not a medical doctor, not someone that you should really listen to about these matters. And in the end, all the rumor mongering and speculation appears, at least for now, to be totally baseless. As we saw today, the president of the United States is very much alive and seemingly as well as ever, for what that's worth. Although he was asked about the rumors in the Oval Office today, which was a strange moment, and we'll have his answer next.
How did you find out over the weekend that you were dead? You see that?
No.
People didn't see you for a couple days. 1.3 million user engagements as of Saturday morning about your demise.
Really? I didn't see that. I have heard it's sort of crazy, but last week I did numerous news conferences, all successful. They went very well, like this is going very well. And then I didn't do any for 2 days, and they said there must be something wrong with him.
There you have it. The president of the United States is alive and, well, his typical self. But while the online speculation over the long weekend turned out to be just that, the growing curiosity about Trump's well-being might be at least a bit understandable, considering that this White House has not given us any reason to trust what it says on just about anything, especially when it comes to the health of a man who is the oldest to ever take the oath of office. Jamel Bowie is an opinion columnist for the New York Times. Tim Miller is a former spokesman for the RNC, now writer-at-large for The Bulwark, and they join me now. Tim, I found that I mostly did stay off social media this weekend, but when the times where I sort of managed to dip in, I was like, wait, what's going on? Did I miss something? Did actually something happen? And why do you think there is this sort of phenomenon that has been gathering force recently?
Yeah, I thought about wearing my white lab coat for this segment, Chris, but I decided not to. I think that this phenomenon is based around a few things. One, Donald Trump is extremely, extremely old. And so people have speculation about him. I think that number two, as you alluded to, they lie about everything. And I think that his last medical report said he weighed, he had the physique of Cincinnati Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow, I'm pretty sure, as far as height and weight is concerned. And so they lie about his health. And so when you have things like weird bruises on your hands and huge cankles, and you're not in public for 48 hours, in a different administration, in the Jimmy Carter or George H.W. Bush administration, they would have provided a statement and people would have believed them, right? And they don't, this administration, you can't do that. So I think that's another reason things get out of hand. And, look, the only thing, I have one maybe agreement with Alex Jones, maybe a disagreement with some viewers on this point. But the one other thing that drives this is Trump does have an insane schedule. I mean, he has a very, very public schedule. It's not like he's a coal miner or whatever. It's not a physical job, but he's a 79-year-old man who's out talking like 5 hours a day in front of cameras and
Yes.
and traveling internationally. If you've ever traveled with a senior citizen internationally, do you think when they land they're going to do a 2-hour press conference? Like, so he keeps a very intense schedule, and then he went away for 3 days, and I think he was probably worn out, and I think that led to the speculation.
Jamel, I saw a few people make this point, which really stuck with me, about people who had been in societies that were not democracies, where there's some authoritarian leader, and how common it is when the leader disappears for a little period of time for this speculation about like the health or the death of said leader, that this is like a real trope in closed societies, authoritarian societies. And that chilled me a little bit and also felt like it had a little kernel of truth to it.
Yeah, it does, I think, have a small kernel of truth to it, that we are already, I think, collectively getting acculturated to looking at the president in this manner as some sort of like leader who has to be present all the time, or people start getting concerned, worried, I think in this case a little excited that something may have happened. I think it's a funny reflection of how central the presidency has become to American political culture. That there is this kind of constant obsession about where the president may be, if they're in the public eye, if they're doing something. And I find that, I mean, separate and apart from Trump, I find the centrality of the president to everything we think about American politics to be not good, to be actually kind of one of the things that has fed into how we've got to where we are today.
I totally 100% agree with that. And I do think also, Tim, part of what's driving it as well is I think there's a sense a lot of people had that there was a lot of speculation about Biden's health. There was a lot of talking about Biden's health. There's been even a long sort of mea culpa, sort of self-recrimination in some of the press that there wasn't enough talk about Biden's health. And I think some people are like, well, this guy is like super old and does clearly have some physical issues in front of him, and also does seem to like blank out sometimes, or like his brain seems mushy, although is it any mushier than it was before? I don't know. And a little bit of like frustration that it's not like even Steven, I guess. Yeah.
I think that there's probably some of that. It's also on people's mind, right? I mean, like the gerontocracy side of this thing.
Yes.
And look, you also had Mitch McConnell, froze a couple of times recently. We've had this in several other cases. So I think that is something that leads to it. But I could not agree more with Jamel, just by the way, just both on this notion that like this does carry echoes of what you see in other countries. I forget, I was talking to one of my colleagues today. I was talking about how I was reminiscent of how, Castro was dying for 20 years. And then finally happened. It was too late. I do think there's a little bit of something to that for sure, and that it reflects poorly on how the centrality of the presidency in our lives right now. Yeah, there was a line about someone posted this, and it really stuck with me, Jamel, that in 1997, in 2007, in 2017, and possibly in 2027, the president was born in the same year in all of those years. Like, we've gone now from like Bill Clinton through like that. It's just the same generation still there as time marches forward.
I mean, there's an interesting observation to make here just about the durability of whatever the Trump coalition is, precisely like looking at his age, looking at the fact that the president, this is the oldest person to take the oath of office, president who's pushing 80, who seems exhausted, and whose victory last year was not nearly as substantial as I think people remember it being. It was sort of the best possible headwinds for Trump, and he barely assembled a winning coalition. And there's one way to look at all of this and to see it not as, a triumphant president on the march, but a quite exhausted one, both literally and politically, attempting to burrow itself into power as much as it possibly can in the short amount of time that it has.
Yeah, and I think part of it, too, is that people have a sense, or hope that he's sui generis and the forces he's unleashed can't be sort of passed around to someone else. And I think that, I don't know if that's going to prove true or not, but I think people do have that hope. Jamel Bowie, Tim Miller, thank you both.
Trump versus Pritzker. So President Trump now warning that he has made up his mind and that he is going to deploy federal troops to the city of Chicago.
Chicago is a hellhole right now. We're going in. I didn't say when. We're going in. If the governor of Illinois would call me up, I would love to do it. Now, we're going to do it anyway. We have the right to do it.
Well, when it comes to that, minutes later, the Illinois governor, J.B. Pritzker, responded to Trump.
I can't live in a fantasy land where I pretend Trump is not tearing this country apart for personal greed and power. He has no idea what he's talking about. There is no emergency that warrants deployment of troops. He is insulting the people of Chicago by calling our home a hellhole. And anyone who takes his word at face value is insulting Chicagoans, too.
Pritzker also says he has reason to believe that the Trump administration has already begun staging the Texas National Guard for deployment to his state. Lulu Garcia-Navarro, Shermichael Singleton out front. So, Lulu, you can hear the intensity in his voice. And I just want to say, though, in terms of what he's saying, it is a new level of fury from Governor Pritzker. Right? He hasn't shied away from a fight. He hasn't shied away from this fight. He likes a fight. But this is different. What he was saying about Trump was different.
It is different. And I think Governor Pritzker feels like it's warranted. I mean, let's put this into the context of what has historically happened in this country. You normally do not have a president essentially saying that he's going to send in troops to a city of the same country, right? I mean, if you look at this, this is punishment and not policy. Policy for crime would be like, I'm going to give you more money. I'm going to surge the police. I'm going to do things to help you tackle crime. This is aimed squarely at states and governors he doesn't like. I read something in the FT the other day which said if this was happening in any other country, they would paint this as, basically a president targeting opposition members in cities that he doesn't control. I mean, it just isn't American. This isn't the way we do things here.
Yeah, sure, Mike, I think Lulu does have a fair point here, right? You would say if this were another country targeting opposition, right? Targeting his opposition leaders, opposition locations, certainly if Putin were doing it. Because the reality of it is that if this were really about crime, why is Trump not doing it in any Republican-led cities or states?
Look, I would do it wherever the crime is concentrated. It's objectively true that there are pockets of the city of Chicago that do have high concentrations of crime. We can't deny that. Look, is this a long-term strategy? Absolutely not. But it is a temporary fix. The president using the bully pulpit to put a spotlight on crime in Chicago, I think makes sense. We're discussing it. The mayor of D.C. just signed an act today allowing local police to work indefinitely with federal law enforcement because what they have seen is a decrease to a number of 0 in terms of murders in the city of D.C. Why would that not be a good thing? In Labor Day, just passed, for example, 58 people were shot in Chicago. 8 of those people killed. The youngest, who is now in critical condition, is a teenager. So, Aaron, to me, you may not necessarily like what the president is doing, but how in the world could any sane person not agree that trying to make safer communities for people who live in some of those higher concentrated areas of crime is not something that should be a bipartisan effort?
So, Lulu, the D.C. mayor, to the point that Shermichael's just saying, Muriel Bowser, she's just issued an executive order that requires coordination with federal law enforcement to the maximum extent allowable by law, in the words of her order, without an expiration date. And she did just days ago admit that Trump's crackdown in D.C. was reducing crime. So what does it mean that she has essentially, it sounds like, said, well, they can stay as long as they want and work with them.
I think it means that she's probably not going to be reelected as mayor of D.C. because if the polling here shows that about 80% of D.C. residents think that this is an absolute overreach, and so this is not happening in consultation with the people who both the mayor and the president are supposed to represent. They do not like this. They see this as an infringement on the city itself, and they see this as an occupation and not as some sort of liberation from crime. Of course nobody likes crime. Of course murders are bad. But this is about something much deeper. How do you do this? Whose role is it to tackle it? And who has autonomy?
So, Michael, what do you make of the mayor?
Can I push back a little bit? I mean, who's saying this? 2 weeks ago, I was on air on Laura Coates' show, and we aired about a 4 or 5 minute package of one of our reporters talking to residents in D.C., for example, who live in some of those very dangerous areas. Mixed race people, young and old, older people saying, at my age, I have to go home before sundown because it is too dangerous. So maybe if you're talking to some milquetoast liberal who lives in Northeast D.C. or Northwest D.C. in a $2 million house,
sure, Michael,
then maybe they're
live
saying,
in Virginia,
it's great.
and I live in
maybe
Washington, D.C.
But let me tell you something. There are a
live
lot
in
of people
Virginia,
who live in the
and I
poor
live in
areas who
Washington,
do
DC.
not see it the way that Lulu just described. And again, I'm not saying, Aaron, that this is a long-term fix. I acknowledge the fact that this is only temporary. You do got to increase funding. You do have to have more policing. But hell, that's pretty hypocritical coming from the other side who demonized the hell out of police for 4 years.
Sure, Michael,
I am
a reporter. I am not the other side. I am simply saying that there was a recent poll that said 80% of the residents of this city do not agree. That's a fact. Now, you can try and cherry pick who you want to talk about, but that is just the way that the people feel here. Now, I believe in a democracy, people who live in a city should have a say in what happens there.
I agree, but I'm also a strategist. I've worked in a lot of polls, and I know focus group, size, 80%. Education, ethnicity, all of that stuff matters, Lulu. It's easy to come up with a poll and say, well, this demonstrates what most people believe. You know that as well as I do.
I think at the end of the day, this is not about crime. I understand that the president and you would like to make this about crime. The bigger concern here is what this means, putting troops on the streets of American cities, troops that the governors of those cities don't want, the mayors of those cities don't want, and the people of those cities don't want. What does that say about the United States of America today? The concern, and I've worked in many of these places, is that this turns into some kind of police state where, of course, you have safety, but you lack liberty. And that is the concern I'm hearing from many, many people.
And Lulu, I don't want that either, by the way. No American wants to live in a police state. I'm in agreement with you there. But people also deserve to live in safe communities, and having 60, 50, 40 people 100%. Killed in the city every other weekend just seems nonsensical to me.
All right, we'll hit pause there. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Aaron.
For the conversation. Thank you. And tonight, President Trump addressing rampant rumors over the weekend that he had died.
It's sort of crazy, but last week I did numerous news conferences, all successful. They went very well, like this is going very well. And then I didn't do any for 2 days, and they said there must be something wrong with him. It's also sort of a longer weekend, it's Labor Day weekend, so I would say a lot of people know. I was very active this Labor Day.
I mean, you'd have to be living under a rock to not have heard the discussion. I mean, the hashtag Trump dead was trending online on social media platforms throughout the holiday weekend. I mean, it was really incredible, frankly. But the reason was, I guess, because Trump had not been seen for 3 days, no public events, which is highly unusual for him because he's always out and about. Also driving speculation was this visible recurring bruising on his hand, which obviously doesn't look good. Out front now, Dr. Jonathan Reiner, who has been a White House medical consultant for 4 administrations. Dr. Reiner, the sources tell CNN that the attention to Trump's hand bruising has made him self-conscious, that until recently he's been trying to use heavy makeup to cover the bruising, and you can see that on it in that one image, which has obviously gone viral. This concerns you. Tell me why.
Well, I'm more concerned. I don't know what he has a bruise on his hand, and I'm sorry he's self-conscious about it. When you see him sitting at the Resolute desk, he always covers his right hand with his left hand in kind of an awkward way. And I'm sorry he feels self-conscious about it. He's a 79-year-old man. He's pretty vigorous for a 79-year-old man, and stuff happens to 79-year-old people. But he's been portrayed for a long time now as basically a part of the Marvel universe. Ronnie Jackson said he could live to be 200, and when you're portrayed that way, you can't have a bruise on your hand. And I don't know why he has the recurrent bruise. But the bigger issue is I don't think in this country we've ever really had full candor about the health of our presidents. And it's really time to start talking about how the public can and Congress can remain informed about the salient points about the health of our leaders.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the press secretary today says Trump's been completely transparent, unlike his predecessor. But obviously, that's not the case. I mean, to your point, I wouldn't say there was transparency then either, but there certainly isn't now.
Well, I think when you're covering a lesion on your arm with makeup, that's basically the opposite of transparency. That's being opaque
in the most literal sense.
Right, but with this president, and in his last administration, he went to Walter Reed in November of 2019, emergently on a Saturday afternoon, and the White House just never told people what that was all about. It's been reported that in 2020 he had COVID days before it was announced to the public. So I think there's precedent to basically understand that this administration has not been completely candid about the health of this president.